So I have this Shindan Maker randomizer thing that I've made a while ago for my Fighting Dreamers cats. What it basically boils down to is you put your name in there, and then it generates, based on these random factors I put in, makes you a little dreamer cat. And I found that it's not only good for making random one-off characters, or like a baseline for you to bounce off of if you ever want to make a Fighting Dreamers fan character, but it also works really good for randomly generating my Alpha Trio characters, or specifically the reincarnated ones. For reference, the Alpha Trio in the Fighting Dreamers series are the reincarnated souls of the first 3 to ever pop up in the buffer zone, which is where all the cats live. And because they were the first 3 to touch a portal, they became forever linked to the buffer zone, and they reincarnate every 10 years or so. And they could be literally anyone. Well, anyone that meets the criteria anyway. First off, they gotta match the respective power color and the dominant power and the eye color of their reincarnation. So take Frost for example. Any future Frost reincarnation's gotta have the blue eyes, the blue powers, and have to at least be ice dominant. Second, they have to have the same birthday as their respective counterpart. Not the year, obviously, but at least the same birthday. Outside of that, they can be literally anything, and it can be very hard to find them because there's so many cats, like elemental powers in themselves, especially if you're like ice dominant, fire dominant, lightning dominant. It's wicked common. So it's really hard to tag the cats until they properly respawn. Respawning being when the cat loses a life and then comes right back into the buffer zone, fully healed, and had a bit of a physical reset based on their waking form. It's a whole thing. But what's special about the Alpha Trio cats is that they don't realize they're an Alpha Trio reincarnation until they respawn, and they get these nasty looking scars on their arms that look like arcing electricity, and that's because that is the Alpha Trio scar that was from their arms hitting the portal and all 3 of them trying to yank the middle guy out and getting that portal electrical stuff all over their arms, and it's like a marker for every concurrent Alpha Trio reincarnation. And the first respawns of a cat can happen in random order, like sometimes you're incredibly lucky and you live to like 20, which is real old in cat years, and don't respawn once. And then you could also be like 3 months old and have like a terrible time as a baby and respawn already, and oh look, you have the scar. But the trios themselves don't get properly documented until all 3 of them have had a respawn and get the scars in their arms, and they're officially tagged as the next Alpha Trio. They could have been alive months or years before this. Or like have one of them be the first one for a while, and then suddenly the second one came in, and then the third just kind of sneaks up right on you. So anyway, back to the generator. So with this process, I was basically taking the stand-in names of the associated Alpha Trio reincarnation, putting them into the generator, plopping them into a notepad, taking away the powers to fit the lore more, so like changing a dominant to what it's supposed to be, and then just outright ignoring like the eye color and the power color, because they're all stuck to like their respective color schemes. Outside of that, I haven't touched the randomizer, and holy crap, I've been getting some results. So I'm going to draw out as many as I can into one video without making it obnoxiously long, even with the Speedpaint stuff, and we're going to see what I did. So my first trio that I made up were a Ragamuffin Purebred, a Cornish Rex Purebred, and a Korat Purebred. And I noticed when I was messing with it earlier that I did get more Purebred than I did Mix, so after this, I tweaked the ratio, so now Mix is way more often than Purebred. And the powers they got were Lightning Shapeshift, Fire Invisible, and Ice Lightning. And it's funny, because like they aged actually pretty reasonably. At 10 years old, 4 years old, and 7 years old, respectively. And that's not a bad age. That's like actually pretty old for a cat, like middle-aged or just adult. That's one of the better times to be a reincarnation. You know, like honestly, if I were to be a reincarnated soul of the first cat ever, and then get immediately killed by a monster in a year, I'd rather be a full-blown adult than, say, a child. Right, yeah, I forgot about that part. That's one factor of the Alpha Trio that isn't great. When they all get reawakened, within the year, they get completely destroyed by monsters. Like, it's like guaranteed. If they're all in the same world at once, they will die. And no amount of luck, like rule of numbers, they're eventually going to all get knocked out immediately. But they're also automatically drawn to each other, so they kind of really work the best together rather than with other teams. Like, they're just inclined to not like the other teams. It's either that or they're on the other teams by themselves, and the monsters looking for them also see the other team members and are like, well, I guess I'll have to kill you guys too. And then in doing so, the teammates just get destroyed. So I think that's part of why they also like to team up, to kind of take the heat off the rest of the teams. Anyway, the voiceover this first part was a little more meta than it was for the rest of them, because, like, you know, like, maybe these guys respond pretty reasonably, like 10 years old, 4 years old, 7 years old. One of them respawned last, probably the 4-year-old, and, you know, it's not bad because they're well past the recruit age, and yeah, it's not too bad of a time, like, not too problematic. Also, note that I went to 1920 rather than 1960 to go with the fact that the last Alpha Trio is like around 1975. At least the one they canonically talk about constantly. That's because these three were the last three before the big gap where, like, none of the Alpha Trios could be found anywhere. Like, none of them showed up. If they did showed up, it was unfounded because there was only one of them, so they could have just been lying. It was a mess. They really, honestly, could not find any Alpha Trios, the little historical area that always searches for them. So they just kind of gave up for a while. And then the 1970s ones came in and they lost their dang minds. So, anyway, here's these first three. The next set I rolled were a Cymric mix, a Savannah mix, and a Bombay mix. I looked up Cymrics. They're basically like Minks, but smaller and chunkier, like another version of them. For the generator, I just pulled like a random list of breeds and popped it into it, so I don't know half of these breeds, which is weird considering how into cats I am. This trio has a bit of a different dynamic. We have the 10-year-old Savannah mix, and then there's the 8-month-old Manx-looking cat, and then the 9-month-old Bombay mix cat, the ice one, which kind of raises a few concerns, but again, it's reasonable. We got the 10-year-old who's been fighting since they were 7 months old, and then the Cymric is only 8 months. That's like a month after you are officially a recruit, so that's not too unheard of. Same for the Bombay mix, who 9 months, so that's like, what, like 2 months of fighting? Thinking about it, maybe the 10-year-old was very lucky and just didn't respawn, so the first one was really the Bombay mix, and then the second one was them, and they were like, oh, no, okay, guess I'm the fire one now, and they were kind of looking around for the third lad, and then here comes this Manx-looking dude, just like, hi, what's up? I'm the third one! Yay! And the 10-year-old's just not into it, and the Bombay one's been freaking out pretty much this entire time, because they have precognition, and that's never fun. The Savannah mix, the 10-year-old, is probably trying to wrangle the Manx guy in, and then the Bombay mix is just kind of sitting there incapacitated by all these visions. Well, if they're precog recessive, the visions aren't, like, as intense as if you had a dominant, but, you know, you still see flashes of the future, and it's not really great to see that when you are the doomed 3 that eventually get absolutely wrecked by monsters. And funny thing was, I thought this was the worst that the generator would make. I was wrong. Now, this next set, I actually rolled Ember first for this one. So, I saw, 8 years old, not bad. Then I saw the Lightning Lad, who was 15 years old. That's pretty old for a cat. So, not great, but I guess they were just inexplicably lucky, and maybe they've been the first of the 3 for, like, years, but just never properly, like, saw the other 2. The second one probably being the 8-year-old, the fire guy. And then that poor Ragamuffin mix. They're not even old enough to be a recruit. Like, you can only go out and do monster fighting when you're 7 months old. There's no way that you're able to... It's just like, you can't fight monsters when you're, like, not even out of kitten training, out of, like, elementary and middle school. That's little bit concerning, honestly. Like, yeah, the respawn stuff, that only triggers when it's a non-monster or non-waking world death. Like, if it's neither of those, if you just, like, die in, like, the buffer zone or in a universe, and it's not related to being in the waking world or being destroyed by a monster, then that means that this poor cat was messed up at some point in their life, probably that same month, during their time in the buffer zone, just living in arguably the most safe place you can be as a dreamer cat. Yeah, they got like 8 lives left, but that's still really concerning. Like, did they get really sick or something? That's the fun part about the generators, because I don't know what to expect whenever these pop up, so I can just make up on the spot what could have happened to them. I'm thinking injuries, or like, you know, like a real bad sickness or something that threw them off guard. Even with cats that have healing powers, there's still some stuff that you can't, like, expect, like an injury or illness, just kind of smacking a cat in the face and just immediately killing them. Luckily with these 3, the 3rd cat won't get into the worlds that the other 2 would be in for another couple months. But they will have to go in eventually, and when they do, they're either a risk to their team, or they are a risk to, like, their trio that they're in now if they all decide to go in there together. Not a great outlook for someone so young. Then came the 1890s trio. Good lord, I was not expecting the generator to think that up. So we got the Javanese mix. They are, like, you know, 7 months old. They're a recruit. Then we have the Devon Rex that's 3 months old. That is a toddler. That is the kitten who is starting kitten training and somehow triggered a respawn before they hit kitten training. That's concerning. They're just a baby. What the heck happened to them? Is it the same situation as that other one? That's concerning. And then there's the Singapore mix that is 20 years old. That is very old. That is geriatric. That is a cat that is too stubborn to die. Like, they will not die. They're the one that was so paranoid in their younger life that they lasted, like, at least until they were, like, 18 or 19 without ever respawning. And then it must have happened, and they're like, well, okay, that's fine. Usually if a cat doesn't respawn, that kind of just elongates how long they'll naturally live. So that's my only explanation for that. The Javanese, you know, you're a recruit, you're a new recruit, it's highly likely, or more likely for you to make a mistake and trigger a respawn on yourself. So they were the second. And then that poor baby, maybe they happen around the same time, but it's, like, it was probably very alarming for, like, the parents of this baby to see that they had this scar thing on their arms, and they're like, oh my god, you're like 3 months old, you're a child. Oh no. And the worst part about this one is that, like, the Javanese mix and the Singapore mix, they'll be going off onto missions themselves, because they probably won't work together. And then, like, this baby will be the last one as, like, those two get knocked off by monsters, leaving this now 7-month-old to be alone on missions, or alone as the only surviving Alpha Trio member, because the other 2 got knocked off. And then only to get knocked off themselves, like, maybe within the month. That's not great. And finally, we got these last 3 who tilted young, but at least they're all kind of on the same boat. So, in the year that the 2 of them that are younger than 7 months wouldn't be able to leave the buffer zone, that buys the exotic mix some time to strengthen their skills, maybe get so paranoid that they don't die by monsters, only to get these 2 other lunatics on their team because, oh, they have to join the same team, they're the Alpha Trio, we have to be all together. And then the exotic mix is just like, guys, like, the ones from, like, 10 years ago, they did the exact same thing, and these other 2 are just insisting, like, the Javanese and the Snowshoe are like, no, absolutely not, we're gonna be fine. It's like, you're not even fully into being a recruit. But they all went together anyway, and that didn't turn out great. They probably died really quickly. That's all I can think of about with these 3. But at least the ages are not as scary. Anyway, that was my rambling about the Alpha Trio and these random 5 rolls that I made. If any of you have ideas for names of them, I'm all ears. I've been just making neutral names in my head, or no names at all, but I honestly have no idea. I'm not the best at coming up with names on the spot. They can be pet names, they can be actual human names, they can be a mashup of the two. Buffer Zone Society is actually pretty open to name changes, because, you know, you have your dreamer name that your parents named you, and you're pretty chill with that, and you can always switch. And then you have the Waking World name, like your pet name, which also is a name that you could choose to be rather than your, like, dreamer name. Or, as always, like I said previously, you can just switch to whatever the heck you want. They really don't care. But yes, if you guys enjoy the speed paints of me rambling about Fighting Dreamers lore, or just Fighting Dreamers in general, then be sure to do that whole like button thing. And also, if you end up liking it, I might do a part 2 when I make another, like, 4 or 5 rolls and see what happens with these 3. We can slowly make the history of the Alpha Trio together. Or I'll be making it, you guys can just be, like, making names and contributing to history. It'd be pretty cool. Also, if you want to make a random Fighting Dreamers cat, I've linked the generator in the description, so you can go ahead and play around with that. If you actually make one that you are intrigued by but don't understand half of it, I'll be happy to explain, like, at least the bits that make sense, and then you can just kind of go ham with their development and all that. But for now, I'm signing off until whatever I end up doing next. So have a nice night, morning, or whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Good night.